एक बहुत बड़ा big surprise here. Okay, when you execute a JUnit system, Spring does not get activated. Means you don't have the power to use Spring container. Gone. Container ही नहीं है. Auto wiring, injections, everything is gone. The framework is not activated. Okay, so that means when you're writing a unit testing, there is no Spring, there is no auto wiring. Beans will not be coming to you. You cannot get it from that application context.get bean because it do not exist. Framework apna independent. JUnit is operating independent to test the system. That's it. And you can just run JUnit even on a non-Spring based environment and it will just work because it is not dependent upon that framework for execution. Now that is, so this thought you have to capture with you. Otherwise you will end up auto wiring and all, kuch bhi nahi milega. It is not activated, as simple as that. Okay? So please know this thing. Okay, when running JUnit, okay, the core Spring system is not activated. Okay, now what does this mean? Now what does this mean? Just imagine you want to test this class payment service IMPL, which is this one. Now you will create an object of this somehow, but in a regular Spring based system, all of these instance variables are constructor injected by the Spring Boot environment. Now comes the point. Okay, how are you going to then provide? If Spring is not going to create this object, not going to then populate this, then are we supposed to create all of these objects by ourselves? Start thinking. We are supposed to create this object and call one of the method here. Fine, whatever, create order, get order, something. We will call, but object needs to be created. If Spring is not giving it, we cannot get it from controller and all of these will be not initialized. So how exactly to do that? So abhi more in depth we will start digging into. And that is where comes a point ki, okay, if you cannot utilize what Spring has to offer, then this unit testing framework itself should give some capability, should give you capability to create and work with objects. And yes, they have provided some annotations for that purpose also. Okay, so abhi dekhte, be very careful and observe everything very closely, guys. Okay, so fine. So you get started like this. Our basic aim is, let's say here, dekho, this create order is straightforward. Get order we have written earlier where we did proper response handling, right? So if it is not null, then we are throwing this exception. And then if it is not 200, then different handling is there. For 200, different handling is there. So we have done some business logic as part of the get order method. Let's test this get order method because it is more complicated compared to this create order is pretty straightforward. There is no response exception handling also. So get order may we added some complexity. Let's test that one. So our basic aim is now we need to get an object of this. Okay, we need to get an object of this, and then somehow we need to call the get order method, and then make sure okay, forever this method runs the way we want right now. Okay, so that is what is our target. We will write unit testing for this get order, and then slowly, yes, you have to cover capture order and other places, other methods also. But ek karke we do it, right? Okay, fine, we need to do this. So that means as a first step, you need to have an object of this in this class. Let's say private, this, and then object you need to have in your class. The next thing is going to be, for this object, you need to call that method get order with some value, let's say order ID. So with some value, basic core programming will remain the same, right? Variable creations, method calling, so we don't change that. Okay, let's say we right now provide some hard-coded value. What did we say, guys? Writing a test case is all about three things. Okay. So you call the method and you have some expectations from the method. Basically two things. But in order to call the method, you need to arrange this data. That also we can break. So we can just put it into simple terms to execute. Okay. How to write a test case or nothing but your test method. Basically three parts. First, arrange the data needed for calling functional method. Step number two, call the functional method. Step number three, check the response. So three things we have to take care of. Arrange the data, call it, check the response. Okay. Now that is what we have to do here. Arranging the data. Okay, this is arrange the data. Fine. Arrange the data. Next, this is invoke. Invoke. Okay, fine. Okay, act. Okay, another terminology there, like act. And the third one is assert or verify. So they have some terminologies for that. Okay, arrange, act, and assert. Assert is nothing but verify. So we will one by one get into the details here. But just try to understand. In order to, if we run this right now, this payment service IMPL is going to be null because you have not created it. And you have not even told JUnit system to create it for you. So naturally, this is going to be null. If you try to call this, it will give you null pointer exception. Okay, let's test it. Guys, while doing unit testing, you need to very closely use your debugging capability, Eclipse debugger. It is a must and should. It will help you to code unit testing properly. Okay, so it's a must and should. So we can test it now strongly. We will add a breakpoint here. Instead of saying run as JUnit, we can say right click, debug as JUnit. Same thing, debug as JUnit. Okay, it started in a debug mode. You need to use this very closely while doing the entire unit testing. And if you see here, null. So object is not there. So we have not created, it's not available, and it's not being used also. Okay, so that's what is the problem. So in such case, if you call this, definitely it's a null pointer exception. Let me release the thread. Gone. Just see. Now it is not in green. Rather, it is saying, hey, there was an error in executing it. There is some problem. And what is the problem? It is explaining here. Null pointer exception came. Where did the null pointer exception came? Here at this line number, you double click, it takes you there. 22 pay, it broke with a null pointer exception. So are you getting it? If the method executes successfully, then it is all green, shows that everything happened properly. If there is error in execution, it is that there was an error. And then, yeah, assertions maybe will come later, but failure ke case mein, it will tell it is a failure. Okay, so please be aware. This is the next observation. Okay. If error in execution of test case, you can check in JUnit view. Okay, I guess it is called as view, not sure, or perspective, something, view or perspective, something is there. Okay, so but whatever. So in this section it is available, be aware of that. Okay, now comes the point, how to provide this object. Okay, guys, there are two annotations we need to use, and along with that there is this concept of mocking which comes in picture now. Okay, so mocking is like not actual objects but something like objects. Mock, dummy. So the concept of mock means not the actual one but a dummy, a replacement of that. So that is the concept of mocking. Okay, so try to understand. In reality, payment service IMPL, in our Spring Boot application, payment service IMPL, the actual object will be created by Spring container, and in that they will inject all of these things during constructor injection, and then you can call all the methods. That's the actual object. Okay, But now, since the Spring is not there, we cannot use that capability here. So we need to create or work with mock object, because actual is not possible here. Mock object or dummy object. Okay. And these guys like JUnit and all, they are providing ways for doing that. So our next aim is what? Here, this is coming as null. We tested it. We don't want to now create an object, because if you want to create an object, then you have to then further create objects of all of this nature, and then system becomes very complicated, expanded. Okay. So we want to use mocking feature. Okay, somehow JUnit should give us this object, which then we will be using in our system. For that, there are certain annotations. Okay, there are two primary annotations: extends with and inject mocks. Okay, I will be sharing up this document to you guys by the end of today's session, but some pointers are there. Simple, using these two annotations, extend with Mockito extension and inject mock, JUnit will create an object of this payment service IMPL and give it to you. But it will not be an actual object, it will be a dummy, so that you can test the functionality. So yeah, different concepts, but yeah, this is what it is. This is how the JUnit framework works. So we cannot get it from the Spring system, because Spring is not getting activated. We cannot auto-wire, we cannot get it. JUnit then has to provide its own way of doing. The way you learned @auto-wire and constructor injection for Spring, now we need to learn how to do it in a JUnit environment. And JUnit is saying, okay, I can give you a mock of payment service IMPL, and then you can work with that and test your functionality. That is good. How to do that? Two annotations you need to use. At the class level, you define like this: extends with Mockito extension. Let's go here. At the class level, Control-Shift-O, extends with Mockito. In the same jar file which is there in the pom.xml, these annotations are also available. And then on the field which you are testing, okay, there you have to use inject mocks annotation. On whichever class you are testing, there you have to use inject mock annotation. So like we said, every test case is going to test one class. So payment service IMPL object you want to test, so we will simply apply @inject mock annotation on this class. So two things: class level like this, and on the instance variable like this. And we are expecting now JUnit should somehow give us an object reference for this one. We are not going to create, because it is too much of headache to create the object and then populate all the values and all. We don't even know what that is. Our focus is we just want to test get order method. Is it working as expected or not? So JUnit has provided us this way. First, let's test it. Then we will try to draw conclusions. Okay. Saving this here. Saving this here. Let's execute it. Saved. Again, let's go back to a debug mode. Right click. Debug as JUnit test. Okay, we are here to this point. Now what is happening, guys? Object came from somewhere. We did not create it. We used JUnit annotation, and now it's not null anymore. Just because of this, from somewhere JUnit mocked an object, created a dummy, an alternate object for us, and gave it to us. Okay, guys, is this part clear? Did you get it? Straightforward. Okay, good. Okay, nice. Let's go forward. Focus step by step. More and more things will start coming as we are digging into it. Object to ban gaya. But guys, now comes the second question. So let me write this into Notepad. Just by using this, we are able to get the object reference. This one plus this one. We got the object reference. Okay. Now, once we got the object reference, so you inject mock, you apply, okay, on the class which you want to do functional testing. Okay, guys, now comes very important part of unit testing. Okay, please remember this part. In unit testing, you test that functional class in isolation. This is the next concept you need to understand. Okay, what does this mean? Okay, let's say, for example, in this scenario itself, our entire focus is to test only payment service IMPL. But if you call this get order method, okay, for now, let's just terminate this. Okay, let's just terminate this. Currently, JUnit has provided as object reference here. Now, if we go inside this, just see the first line itself, 118, what they are doing. This class payment service IMPL is using some other reference of some external class, get order request helper, and calling that class there. Right? In the get method, you take this and then you call another class ka another method. Now, please understand, when you are writing the test class of payment service IMPL test, testing this method is not your concern. In order to test this prepare request method, you will write another test class, get order request helper test. So what is happening? So when you write a test case for this functionality in this class, if you are creating some other objects like this and calling their methods, you are not supposed to test that. You are not even supposed to call those methods. So that is what is the statement. Every functional class is tested in isolation, means independent from one another. So now let's put it into some diagram so we can just draw a conclusion. Okay, so let's say if you have written your Java class, let's say my class.java, and in this one you have created some, let's say, reference one class, ref1, and then there is another class object you have created, ref2, and then this is ref2, and then in your method you have written a m method, and in this method you are using ref1 and ref2, right? So you would have your business logic also. You would have your business logic here. But along with your business logic, you're calling ref1 dot its method 1. And then after a certain time, you're calling ref2 dot its method, whatever it is. And then you write another business logic. So guys, please understand this important thing. And then this ref2 and ref1 and ref2 are different. Their code might be something. Method 1 code and method 2 code. So whatever lines of code it is having, we are not supposed to test that here. Unit testing says our entire focus should be only to test functionality of this M method, not what is happening in method 1 of some other class and method 2 of some other class. The only focus is we should be able to test this piece of code. Is this working as expected? Is this working as expected? Is this working as expected? Not these external calls. In order to test this method 1 and method 2, you would write some other test cases for that. Some other test case for this, some other test case for this. So that is what is the statement. Every functional class has to be tested in isolation. Okay. So now comes the point, guys. Now comes the point. In our code here, if we want to test this get order, so our entire focus is we should be testing only get order. So if in get order you're calling this prepare, we don't want to test that. If you're calling this make HTTP request, there is different business logic here. No, we don't want to test that. We should focus only on the logic written inside here, which executes directly here, not calling some other places. How to do that? For that also mocking is required. Okay? guys thoda sa ek ek karke let's start observing. We will again run the system as a debug mode. Okay, let's again go here. Let's run the system as a debug mode. Right click, no, not this one, test class here, debug as JUnit test. Okay, as part of this, earlier we saw, because of this inject mock, this object was created. Okay, object is created, very good. But now observe the second thing. For this dummy object, temporary object which is created, all of the other instance variables are null. So JUnit by default has not given us any internal objects. The way Spring is creating it and injecting it, all that is nothing. JUnit gave you a dummy object, which is nothing but simply payment service IMPL instance with nothing in between. They don't have anything else. Everything is null. And now let's imagine if you get inside this get order. You can call get order because this object reference is available. Let's go inside that. Step into. Okay, we are here. But if you look at here now, this value is null. So JUnit has not provided that. And the point is, we are not even supposed to have that object because we don't want to test the prepare request method. Understand? JUnit is not giving. Plus, thing is, we don't even need it because JUnit doesn't expect you to test that prepare request of that method here. Our aim is to test only this piece of code. But here null is coming. If you don't do some additional handling, it is going to throw a null pointer and still the system is going to fail. So just observe. So we need to run this line, but we don't want to call this prepare request method. That is the situation we are in right now. And there is a way of doing that. Okay? We want to call this, but we don't want to execute the internal logic. How we do that is again the power of mocks. So for now, if you just release the thread, okay, it is going to fail. And the reason it has failed is the same one. Okay, on this, there is a null pointer. Cannot invoke this because that object reference is null. So test case has failed. And now comes the point, somehow this object should be also mocked. We don't want to create an actual object. We again need a mock because we are not focused in executing this functionality. And it is coming as null, so you cannot call it. So the next aim is, whichever this object is, same object, you need to define in your test class. You need to define that in your test class. And you need to tell that it is @mock. Okay, please understand. For mocking purpose, we are using Mockito library. So for unit testing, yes, JUnit is used. Mocking is using another library called as Mockito. So there are these two terms. Okay, Mockito library. In interview, if they ask for mocking purpose, what do you use? Mockito library. For unit testing, we are using JUnit library. So there are two terms. And you can see the package naming. All the mocking related libraries are available inside Mockito. The unit testing libraries are simply with JUnit. Now, just try to observe. Simply putting that class with a mock, JUnit system will use this mocking library and create a dummy object even of year and inject this object inside this variable. Currently, null was coming, so null pointer exception was thrown. But now we are saying we don't want to call that prepare method of that, but we want to not have a null pointer exception. For that reason, we are saying put a dummy object for this variable. Somehow these two annotations will work hand in hand. This will mock and this is inject mocks. So all the mocks will be injected to this class. Let's test it, then we can see it better. Okay, so let's continue. Let's continue project. Because null reh raha hai. Otherwise, how will the object come? It is a null object. Null pointer will always keep coming. So you need to even mock that because you need dummy there. So debug as Maven, not build, debug as JUnit test. Observe closely, guys, on the results. So here we are. Now we need to get inside this. Step into. Okay. Now let's see what is coming here. Yes, object came earlier. Now they go inside that, it is null. And that is null because again, that is a dummy object. You have not created a full-fledged object of get order request helper, because we don't want to test that also. Why to create that object and populate all these values? But because of @mock annotation and then inject mock, this object, a dummy object, is created and it is provided to payment service IMPL. So now we can call this, it will not throw a null pointer exception. Guys, did you get it? Clear? Team. So थोड़ा experiment करो, debug करो, you will get better control. Because Spring is not doing any object creation. So we have to take care of object creation. Of those objects, we need to create based upon our need. Our need is focus only on payment service IMPL, not external classes. So if you don't want to focus on external classes, why to get the objects? Let's mock all that. How do you mock? @mock annotation. Okay, let's continue further. Let's continue next experiment. Now, likewise, if you see, we mocked only one object. So, aa gaya. But HTTP client util is not mocked, so that will still be a null pointer. So when you are writing this unit testing, you need to actually study the functional code, and you need to make sure that whatever the functional, guys, listen this part carefully. While writing unit testing, you need to study the functional code, and whatever the functional code needs, you need to accordingly make changes in your unit testing. So it's not like some textbook definitions. Unit testing is like you study the functional code, accordingly build the unit testing code. It's not like just do it like this, like this. No, it's not going to work. You need to keep your mind open. You need to think. You need to read what logic it is. Accordingly, you need to handle it in the test case. That's the only way of actually writing unit testing. No mug-ups, nothing else will work, because method to method, logic will change. When the logic is changing, your writing the unit testing code is going to also change. Okay. So now comes our next need. Because if you don't handle, so this is coming as null. Again, it will run this first line, no problem. But when it comes here, it is going to fail again. So that's the next conclusion. Okay. While writing unit testing, you need to closely understand functional code and build your unit test code accordingly. Very important. Okay, fine. Now another thing, guys. So this is one observation. So we will do that. So HTTP client util also we need to mock, otherwise it will fail there. But another key observation, just see here. Okay, dekho. In this prepare request, I go inside prepare request F3, and I am putting a breakpoint here. Okay, let's see. Let's put a breakpoint there, and then we come back here. And now I'm doing a step over. Okay, just see that breakpoint is not hit. Are you seeing that? In regular debugging, right? If this prepare request method is executed by your CPU, so the control should have gone here. The control should have stopped at this breakpoint. This system.out.println should have been printed, but it did not happen. That means the reference which came because of mock, it is not the actual object reference. It is dummy. We are not even able to call that method. Did you see that now? That is just magic. If you understand the significance of this, this is beautiful. There is a reference, but when you call the method code is not executing. Breakpoint is not caught, code is not executing, means it is so much dummy in implementation. Okay, only null handling happened, you move forward. Okay, now understand the second part, guys. If method is not executed, what will the method return? Nothing. If this prepare request method is not even called, iska return type mein whatever object is nothing, right? If this method is not even called, what will be the return type? Empty. And that is what, if you do a mouse over here, it is null. Because the business logic of this external mock is not even invoked. So whatever is the default return types based upon the, if it is integer, maybe it will give a 0, and for all the other objects it will give a null. That is what it is doing. This is interesting. Okay, you called it, it did not execute. Abhi did not execute, return types will be default. If you use these return types further, you have to think what to do for that as well. Sochna padega. Okay, but let's write down this conclusion. Interesting. Okay, so when you call any method on mocked object, the functionality is not invoked, rather dummy rather nothing would happen, and default empty return object or return value would come from that method invocation.